Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a first submission by Jean of her horse Naya. Naya is an 8-year-old that Jean acquired after the loss of her previous horse. Horse was kind of a lawn ornament who'd had a leg injury that even the owner really tried to talk her out of taking and doing something with, but she fell in love with the horse and took her on, and she's doing a really great job with her. So for the first submission, I think you've really done a great job. She's been working on her own after only watching the videos, which is really wonderful. It just thrills me, as you all can well imagine, to see you people being able to take this information that we have out there and be able to put it to good use. So that makes me feel very good, and I know that each one of you, just like this one, who learns this work is going to save hundreds of horses in the future. So good work to you. Now we see there she gets a little unrhythmic as she comes around that little shoulder in there for just a moment and looks a little short-strided. Now here she's still pulling with her shoulders a little bit. It's got a pretty nice rhythm to it. It's just slightly too slow. Now when you get later on in this video, as we see, she will get to a really good place. So this is a good place to start, but just pointing this out as you go. What we need to get sooner is a deeper stretch. And I'd like to see you do more of that in the walk to get her deeper before you begin the trot work. This is a little too soon to be sitting to the trot as we're just getting started here. And it's a little too slow in terms of her. While it's a pretty steady rhythm, there's just not enough push. And you can see how she's kind of stumbling around those turns a little bit. Just a little bit too tight on those turns. And I'd like to see you back in a rising trot, which is what you do here because it really got too slow. So what we need to do is get this horse sooner, more like it is in the end of this tape, which we'll all see that she finally starts working through her back quite nicely. In all of this early work, she's almost there, and it's calm and quiet, but she's just not quite pushing up through her back. See, we can still see the underside of the neck is a little bit tight there, and she's not quite stretching into it and reaching in and not really giving us the flexion in her hocks that she does later on once we get a deeper stretch with the horse. So not a bad shoulder in there. Once again, just all of this needs to be done in a little deeper frame with just a little more swing in it. Getting a little better here, but if you look closely, you can clearly see the horse is kind of halfway there. She's kind of pushing a bit with her hind legs, but she's also stabbing the ground a little bit in front. So we see how heavy she is there. That is on the front end because she hasn't developed enough thrust to come up through the back. Now, having said that, remember that all horses start out on the forehand until they gain enough strength to get off the forehand. Now, yes, there are some fabulous young horses that have, superior conformation, and yes, they do get off their forehand a little more easily, which is the point of having a horse with good conformation. But, even the best in the world take some time to develop the strength that they need. So now as soon as you come back to the walk here, I like this walk better than I like the trot that you just had, in that it's a little bit deeper when she comes back to the walk. Now just needs to be a little more active. Now I'm sure compared to what you must be seeing around you if you're in a Western pleasure barn, it probably seems like you're flying around the arena. But she can still open up that stride a little bit more and give me a little more spring. We have to get the neck a little lower because she's not quite pushing up into the back yet, which tells me, of course, we can't see a lot there because the saddle's so big, but I can tell from the ground there, as you feel her begin to come a little lighter, you'll know that she's thrusting up into the back. And remember, that's what real collection is the level of the thrust that lifts the front end off the ground. So what we lose in forward motion, in forward swing, we gain in upwards lift, but the gait still has to be rounded in that. When we're in those gaits, instead of the short choppy strides that we see now with knees lifted high. Remember, knees have nothing to do with whether the horse is working over its back or not, or whether it's on the forehand or not. In fact, usually you could say the horses with the highest knee action are more on the forehand than any others, because they're just kind of stabbing their legs up and down. So this is a little better here. She's starting to swing a little better. We see a little less stabby. Now notice as soon as you sit there how she I see a degradation in the gait, which tells me that she's not really quite ready to be set on at that level yet. She couldn't maintain the position over her back. Now the circle into the canter here is pretty good. It's still a little flat-footed. Now you see when she made that downward transition, how she's kind of struggled against her front feet there a little bit. So I would, at this point, when you make those downward transitions at this level, really take it down through the gears and be sure every time that you do that you have a good trot before you go to the walk. Now that was a lot better in that one, and you were rising to the trot in that, so we didn't just lose all forward momentum. So much better transition on that one. Now here again, she's a little too slow in the trot, in the sitting trot, so not quite really ready to be right there yet. As you see, all of a sudden you can see her, she starts pulling with the shoulders a little bit, digging her toes in. Now that's getting better. As she starts to lower her head, if you can correct it, that's good. Still needs to get a little lower and have a little more swing in it, but that was not bad. Good halt. Now this work, while you're doing this turn on the haunches here, is a little too slow. The good part of it, she does keep stepping her legs in the rhythm, but we'd like that to have a little more action in that, so to speak, that she has a little more liveliness rather than just kind of lifting herself around. But she did take each step, so that part of that was very good. So here, once again, she's just a little too slow in this sitting trot, so you can kind of see her stabbing her front legs again a little bit. There she starts to lower her head. Look how she begins to thrust a little more, so that's good. Now, I'd still like to see it a little bit more. She's got a ways to go, but that's much better there. So be sure when you sit, if you can't do what you just did, which was put your leg on and get her to come back up underneath you a little bit more, then you wouldn't want to do that. And you wouldn't want to do much sitting trot with this horse at this level. Now, the canter transitions are good up into them, but the canter is still just a little bit hollow here. It's just not, once again, it looks a little labored, like it's running out of gas. So we'd like to see a little bigger swing in that. You want to try to open it up a little more so you can feel the canter coming from behind a little more. And once again, remember, your canter should not, contrary to popular belief, feel like a rocking horse. It shouldn't feel like you're rocking back and forth. On a correctly trained horse, you feel like yes, there's a little bit of movement up and down, but you feel like you're buoyed on top of a wave that keeps refreshing itself, so you don't fall all the way down, so to speak, which is what happens when the horse isn't cantering through the back. And like that early trot work, that canter was kind of almost there, but not quite, but not terrible either. So certainly working in the right direction. Now, just that moment that you went over there, that pole, it would be a perfect example of how, you can see how she did that. She immediately hollowed and threw her head up in the air. So when you work on cavalettis or anything that you want to go over like that, the goal is to keep the horse over its back while you do. I mean, that may have been just an accident. I'm not sure what happened there, but just to point that out, that what happened when you did that is the horse just hollowed and threw its head up in the air. Now, this canter is a little better here on this side, starting to swing a little more. Now, I'd like to see you in those downwards transitions go right to the rising trot, so she kind of stumbled into a heap there a little bit, and that's what we want to avoid there. So I would take a little more time in my transitions at this point if she's transitioning like that. That is, we don't want them to fall in a heap. So spend a little more time between each gait once you start to work from gait to gait. And remember, you're never going to get a really in place head and neck, so to speak, that they don't move or the horse doesn't lose its back when you do all these different things. So take a little more time in those transitions. That is, come back from the canter, right to a rising trot, keep the rising trot active, and then make a transition back to walk. Because that's the biggest thing I think in all of her transitions on this tape is they mostly are kind of falling in a heap. Which the best way to remedy that is get the horse working over its back more consistently. So as the horse gets stronger, that's why in the beginning we simply we only expect the horse to be in a consistent position in the gait. When we have a good walk and a good trot, then you'll see that the transition problems disappear. Now that was a pretty good transition up into the canter there, and this is actually a better canter this time around than what we saw the last time. It's got a little more swing in it, and you do a great job on the counter canters here. A little stumbly there, so remember that the counter canter is very difficult, so you might want to try thinking a little wider turns if you find that she starts stumbling through them. But that looked like a little footing also issue there that kind of got buried in the corner, which is something we have to watch in dressage rings, that they don't end up being 3 times deeper in the corners than they are everywhere else. Now, I like the way you handled this transition a lot better, and now we have a much better trot. Now we're starting to get something that actually looks like a working trot. You see how she's lifting up, and you don't have that impression that she's stabbing the ground so much with the front legs. Now, this horse still needs to get deeper in the neck in all 3 gaits, but it's getting to a good place, and especially by the end of this tape, we get to a really pretty good trot. I like how she's stretching out here. That's all really good. So remember, when we're stretching like this, the counter canter can be quite difficult, so we don't want it to be, you don't want to make any sharp turns. So that's all really good. Nice counter canter through the short side, doesn't lose her back. And we actually do find for some of these horses that are a little straighter behind, like a lot of quarter horses are, the canter can often be better for them than the trot in some cases. In other words, you might get there sooner at the canter if you do it right. Little spook there doesn't mean anything, but you did just the right thing. You just put the horse right back to work, and that's exactly what any good rider does. You know, horses are going to look at things, and if you are afraid of horses spooking, you probably shouldn't be on that horse that you're riding, because you just have to throw away the reins and just keep going so that they get over the idea. The worst thing you can ever do when a horse spooks is stop and pat it on the neck. There. Now this trot looks a lot better. Now when you made that transition to the sitting trot, the horse didn't just sort of crumble into a ball. Now in the other transitions you were able to get it moving again, but this is the first time here that we really see the horse beginning to work over its back in a really good way and beginning to see the thrust through the back begin to lift the front end. Remember, that's what makes a horse light. A horse that's hollow in the back is never going to be really light. And once again, remember that some of this what some people call Baroque or this old style classical dressage was a dressage that, you know, was just the beginnings of dressage. Later on, as dressage developed, and it culminated in the early 20th century with riders like Egon von Neindorf, who had really figured out a system for developing horses and what it really took to get them there and how they developed. So the modern system of dressage is the culmination of that, adding in the ability to work over the back so that you can actually do extended gaits as well as collected gaits. But that was a really nice canter. Now that was the best trot we had seen. The horse was really starting to work over its back there. And once again, as an example there, you had that last halt. Some people might say, well, the horse didn't halt straight. I don't worry about a horse halting straight until it works over its back. Once it's consistently over its back, it just will halt straight. So that's why you will never see me, and nor should anyone else, drill halt transitions or any other transitions, because they only get worse. They get tighter. When you drill things over and over again, the horse just gets exhausted and becomes tighter. And unfortunately, those people who mistake collection for shortening a horse into shortened gaits, you know, they think they've gotten somewhere because they finally pull the horse into some resemblance of a square halt. But a real square halt never happens. That is with the horse really underneath itself, unless the horse is working over its back. Once again, pretty good canter here. Could be a little bit deeper like it was on the other side. This one seems a little more struggling. There, as soon as the neck gets out in front of you, then the horse starts to really work through the transition. And once again, a good transition there as you came right back to the rising trot. Now notice that time was good because the horse, once again, like the last one, did not just stop moving as soon as you set in the saddle. Now right there kind of gets a little too slow. You can see how the horse starts pulling. So when you feel those loss of rhythm, that's what it's trying to tell you, is you're asking for something that is just got a little too hard for the horse. So you needed to come back up there. I would have gone back to the rising trot a little sooner here and got the horse moving a little better again. Though that was starting to happen there before the tape cut. Now on you, now just notice one thing, you know, in this Western saddle, the biggest problem with these kind of saddles is they sit you in a chair seat. That is, you're sitting with your legs way out in front of you. So go back and take a look at that down the road someday as this improves. Even there are some old Western saddles that really were copies of the old McClellan military saddles that brought you more to the front. Now that was a better turn on the haunches. The horse kept a little more active rhythm that time, and of course was more into the stretch when you asked for it. So we want to have a saddle that lets us come up close to the withers where we sit, because that's the point, that's the strongest point of the horse's back. It's also the point that has the least movement. Now that canter was rather struggling and too slow. Same thing here, the horse is really struggling, kind of struggling onto its forehand. So that's really not a good canter there. It needs to be much opened up and bring it through from the back. Now that's kind of like that rocking horse canter that we talk about, where the horse is disconnected and just kind of go up and down behind. So you've done some really great work here with this, and I look forward to seeing another one. Now this was a couple of months ago, so I can only assume it's going to be better than that when we next see her. Now there, once again, you get her a little more active, and that's more like what we're looking for. Now notice how the underside of the neck is soft when you get to that point, and you don't have that impression like the horse is struggling to pull you through the sand. We want the horse to pick you up and actually lift you out of the sand is what we're looking for the horse to do. Think of it that way. But not by lifting its knees straight up in the air, by pushing its body up into the air, by thrusting into the back with the hind leg. Once again, that can only happen if the back is round. Just one more point here, that your throat latch there is a little too tight on this horse. You need to open that up a little bit so it doesn't get too tight as she starts to begin to soften the jaw and poll. Now, much better halt that time. And actually, look what a nice rein back this is. It's 4 beat. I'm sorry, it's 2 beat, and that's exactly what we want to see, not 4 beat. Good work. See you next time. This is Will Faerber.